Welcome to another Greenlight Ventures presentation of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff Deforrest, very happy to be with you. We don't normally start out the show with concerns about the weather, but we are originating from the state of Florida, where Hurricane Helene is doing its thing. It's winding its way through the Gulf of Mexico and looks like it's going to make a direct hit, at least all of the predictions. The cone of death, as they call it, is bullseye on Tallahassee, Florida. Very unusual place for hurricanes to hit. And hopefully the people that are in its way will adhere to all of the warnings, which we never used to. Maybe this is a tip that global warming actually is a scientific fact. Because for years after I moved to Florida in 1981, we used to get these warnings, and the weather people would come on and they would try to panic everybody to go into Home Depot so Arthur Blank could go ahead and overpay for another quarterback that was going to bomb out. And everybody would go and run and buy plywood and all the other stuff, board up their windows. And it was always a false alarm. It was like the boy who cried wolf. And then Hurricane Andrew came in 1992. I remember I was doing a Dolphins broadcast, and we were getting the weather advisories, and they were saying, doom and gloom, and this is going to be really devastating. And we tended to shrug our shoulders and ignore it. I remember making some jokes about it that, we haven't really been hit with a hurricane since like the 60s and Hurricane Camille. And then sure enough, after the area that I was staying in wasn't overwhelmingly impacted by it. Some trees were down, a couple of cars smashed up. We got the aerial shot of the area known as Homestead, Florida, and it was completely flattened. And you looked and said, that's the last time I'm going to take any of these advisories lightly. So people in its path, it's affecting the sporting world, and we'll get into that a little bit because we're going to try and talk a little baseball here on the show, as we're scheduled to be joined by our good friend Mike Jones, a baseball handicapper of great expertise. And we have the games coming up over the weekend now, postponed until Monday, which could be hugely impactful on the baseball postseason that we wanted to get into a bit, as the Mets and the Braves had their two games postponed, and now they'll play a doubleheader after the regular season was supposed to be over on Monday, and that could determine the last couple of spots in the wild card chase. So we shall see. The Mets needed to win 2 out of 3 against the Braves, lost the first game of the series, next two postponed, and sets up kind of an interesting weekend of who's in and who's out and who's really playing in Major League Baseball. So you might be able to make some kind of a score off of that. If you are betting the games, the place to go is BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads as the games are being played. If you think you know your stuff, you can get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance to win weekly prizes of up to $200,000, a share of 200 grand. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino. You can play blackjack, you can play poker, you can indulge in over 150 slot games they make available to you. Head to the website today to get in on all of this great action. Bet online, the game starts here. All right, we're going to start and having a little trouble connecting with our guest, Mike Jones. Hopefully, going to be able to join us and talk a little baseball with us. He had some selections for you. I have been dizzy, and we do have a full slate of football coming up, including tonight's game, a matchup in the NFC East between traditional rivals. I guess everybody's a traditional rival in the NFC East. The Cowboys, at one time known as America's team, not sure that they enjoy that distinction anymore. And the New York Giants, who are giddy after finally winning a ball game with Daniel Jones at quarterback. By all rights, they could be 2-1. And look at that. He just popped in there out of nowhere. This is excellent. Our good friend Mike Jones going to join us. But I was looking at some trends on this game just real quickly before we get in and talk some baseball with Mike. I'm not sure what I buy into this because I was never a big trend handicapper. I don't care what the Giants did in the 60s with Andy Robustelli. I don't know what kind of impact that's going to have on this game tonight. But there are some trends in favor of both teams, the Cowboys and the Giants. The boys are laying 5.5 in this one. The last Thursday night games, the last 8 Thursday nights that the Cowboys have been on the field, and that the G-men have been on the field, the Giants are 0-8 in their last 8 Thursday night games. In September, the Giants and the Cowboys, in the last 8 games, the Cowboys are 8-0. Rather, the G-men are 8-0 against the Cowboys. in those games in September. So a couple of things that we're looking at. But we want to look at some baseball, and we'll get back into the football a bit later on. We're joined here by the great Mike Jones. Mike, how are you, my friend? Well, we don't have you. Your mic is not working, so that's going to be definitely a prohibitive factor here. As we try to get some sound on Mike Jones. We wanted to talk about baseball and some of the things that he's doing. Has an app out there that is absolutely outstanding. That's gaining momentum, and if we can get the sound on here, then we'll be in pretty good shape. Otherwise, we're going to have another AJ Hawk situation where a guy just stares into a camera for the entire show, the duration. Is it 2 hours on Pat McAfee where AJ Hawk just looks into the camera and goes like this? I'm not sure, but hopefully we'll be able to get the sound working here with Mike. Just keep talking, Mike, and click a bunch of buttons and hope that it works out. So we can get into the baseball thing. Very interesting, though. I was never a fan of the idea. I usually was repulsed by the idea of bastardizing the postseason and putting more and more teams into the playoffs. We know it's all about a money grab. And in the case of Major League Baseball, when they first added the wild card, the original wild card, I thought, oh, geez, they're really taking the regular season and reducing it to meaningless stature. What are you going to play 162 games for if you don't eliminate the majority of teams? Then they added in the second wild card, now the third wild card, and I have to say, it really has greatly heightened my enjoyment of the regular season. It's put a lot of importance on a couple of different factors, including wanting to not only win your division, but then win your division and have the best record at the end of the season. And what we're seeing is you're looking at this last weekend of the baseball regular season where a lot of teams, Flowers are already in the punch. They have no incentive to play. Now they're in contention for playoff spots. And wow, well, we got something there, Michael. I don't know. There are signs of life. As well, once again, we have two things working here. My theory about the postseason and trying and attempting to get Mike Jones here to be capable of verbalizing some things on the show. That this I don't know what the solution is, Mike, but you might want to maybe click off and try to punch in again. That might work because you kind of came in out of nowhere. So we'll try and get back to Mike Jones here on the program. A little bit of a distraction, but we really wanted to get his insight into what was happening on the show. But yeah, the bastardizing of the playoffs. I mean, if you look at what's happening, it's absolutely fascinating because those two games are going to be interesting to see how they stack up. And teams now, the Mets thought, well, geez, even if we only take one against the Braves in the series, we're going to go into Milwaukee, where the Brewers have some incentive to keep things going. So, really did a good job on that. I don't know if it's going to expand any further. You now have 12 teams out of the 30 that make the baseball postseason, and it does seem like a lot, but you are also getting the impact and the desired effect. I'm not sure that the in-season NBA tournament is bringing about the same impact and effect. That yeah, I don't know, Mike. This may be one where we have to just throw in the towel on and attempt again at another time, since there's no way escaping the fact that we have essentially a handicapper on and may as well have like a mime at this point. All right, see what you can do to fix that up. In the meantime, yeah, that'll be very exciting and an exciting conclusion to what's going to happen in the baseball season. I grew up a Yankee fan, and then I changed my allegiance because it was too easy to be a Yankee fan. And we thought, well, geez, we'll become contrarians. Still, and this was one of my inaugurations into the degenerate world. A friend of mine, when I was growing up in Brooklyn, I was 9 years old at the time, born in 1951. So we had the 1960 World Series, where the Yankees, an overwhelming powerhouse, were taking on the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, we all know what the result was, but at that time, I mean, a dollar went a long way. And my buddy, a kid named Richie D'Angelo, he talks to me. He was kind of like the neighborhood Fonz. So you wanted to be on his good side. And I'm not sure that I really believed that we had any chance of coming through on this. But he says to me, hey, listen, Deforrest, why don't we book all the action that we can muster up from our friends and the kids in the neighborhood? Why don't we book all the action against the New York Yankees in the World Series? And I'm thinking, how can we afford to do that? I mean, you're going to have everybody jumping on the bandwagon of the New York Yankees. And sure enough, we had like 20 friends, and of those, besides Richie and myself, Richie and me, 18 of them wanted to bet the Yankees. So we have $18 up at a time where $18 would have been the equivalent of about 1,800. We're like 9 and 11 years old. And if you watch the way that World Series transpired, we're responsible now. We're going to have to come up with $18. We probably had spent some of the money that we had accumulated from taking the action in advance. That's the way it worked back then. You didn't punch up things on your phone. And sure enough, I mean, every other game, the Yankees are winning like 15-3. The Pirates would come back and win 3-2 on some bunt single in the ninth inning that turned into a run. Yankees would come back and pound them the next day. And we get to Game 7 at Forbes Field in Pittsburgh, PA. And I'm looking at what's happening. I believe it was like 10-6 at one point in favor of the Pittsburgh Pirates, or 9-6, something along those lines. And my buddy and I, Richie and I, are on the train. We're halfway to Queens because we were in a situation where had the Yankees sustained that lead and won Game 7, we had no way of being able to pay these guys off. Zero chance. So it was a loser leaves town situation for us. I mean, we may as well have been that masked wrestler from the Midwest coming in and just taking it on the chin at Madison Square Garden in another Vince McMahon Sr. spectacular. So we're trying to figure out, I mean, when we can come back to town. It's almost like being Michael Corleone in The Godfather after he whacked the cop and his rival. We're sitting somewhere in Sicily thinking, geez, I don't know when we can get back to Brooklyn. And sure enough, the Yankees started coming back, and they end up in a situation where Mazeroski steps to the plate. And when that ball left over the left field wall there by Bill Mazeroski, I was halfway to Queens, and we got off the train at the next station, got back on the train that was going the other way, came back to Brooklyn, and then started celebrating and bragging. All of the defeated Yankee fans were face down in the gutters of the streets there in Brooklyn, New York. And we had collected an $18 score, which certainly was a life-changing moment for me at the time. We were just enriched to levels that we never thought were possible. And the rest is history. Been gambling our brains out the rest of our lives. But baseball this year looks to be wide open. That's why we wanted to talk to Mike and see what his thoughts were going into the postseason. I've mentioned that I have a friend that has a bet that, and I don't know, well, what would you do? Because that is the Shakespearean question, to hedge or not to hedge. If you had a crack at $90,000 on a parlay that you had made, putting up a single $100 bill, and I guess, I don't know, if you top that off with the fact that the guy that made this bet is a man of substantial means. So the 90,000 is not going to be the life-changing score that it might be for many of us out here that are fans of Bury Your Bookie. But nonetheless, I mean, the winning, you could be the richest bastard in the world, and you would rather win 50 grand on some wager than you would make $2 million. Do you find that to be the case? Doesn't matter how much money you're making or how little that you're going to win on a wager, you still feel better about winning that wager. Because you were right. I mean, it's verification. It's validation. It's telling you that your life is worth something at that point, and so is your opinion. So I don't know. What would you do? Would you hedge off on that? I mean, I certainly would be inclined to. And think that, he needs the Dodgers to win the World Series. He had UConn to win the college basketball championship. That was a check. He had Boston to win the NBA championship. That was a check. And Boston, even though they were favored, they still were like 3 or 4 to 1. And then where he really fattened up his chances of cashing a big ticket was when he had the Florida Panthers to win the Stanley Cup, which they did. So he's got all those 3 in a parlay. I guess he could cash out the ticket now at maybe 30,000 is its value, and you can cancel out these things or cash them out early if you're in a position to win. There used to be a site, I'm not sure if that's still in existence or necessary anymore, because casinos are willing to go ahead and accord you this particular favor, and that is they'll cash your ticket early, and you don't have to sweat the last leg of the parlay. But it does take some of the fun out of it, that's for sure. So if you are, one of those people that needs the money badly, I guess hedging would be the way to go. But you might want to wait a series and see if the Dodgers and they might possibly have a bye in the first round. So how far do you go before you start hedging off a little bit, figuring, hey, I only put up $100. I'm going to possibly take down 90,000. Is it okay that I make at least 10? At that point, I think because you've already hit three legs, you want to at least cash something on this thing. So maybe you hedge off a little bit against them, but very early on and a wide open possibility. I don't know that anybody can say with certainty what team is going to emerge as the champion. Look what happened last year. We had Texas and the Arizona Diamondbacks, a couple of teams that were in there at substantial odds to win the World Series before the season and even before the playoffs. And you ended up cashing on two teams that would have been very difficult to see as the possible winners and the eventual champions. So maybe that same thing will happen this year. A lot of interesting things happening in the races, though, as Baltimore still has staved off the Yankees' attempt to clinch the American League East. And that's the other thing about the expanded playoffs. They put much more importance on actually winning the division. So when you had two teams that were clearly separate from the rest of the pack there in a certain division, and one was guaranteed a wild card spot. Now it's added incentive to go out there and win the division. So baseball, which often is criticized as a sport that seems to be fueled by self-sabotage, in this case seems to have done something right and have created one of the most exciting final weekends that you can imagine, with still many things at stake and still actually postseason positions also very much in play. All right, so we mentioned the Cowboys and the Giants. That's going on tonight. We had Troy West on the show with us yesterday, and he was all in. He thinks the Cowboys are going to destroy the Giants. The Cowboys' rushing defense is as porous as it could possibly be, almost a Red Sea type of defense. And you would imagine that Brian Daboll, the Giants coach, especially emboldened coming off this win, and they could have easily been 2-1 going into this game, as lousy as they've looked, and they were horrendous in week number one and getting shellacked. You come back in week two and have no kicker after Graham Gano pulled a hamstring while he was running after a guy who, unfortunately, he not only didn't realize that the play wasn't going to count anyway because there was a flag on the field, but pulls his hamstring, and it probably cost the Giants a game. They didn't have a competent backup kicker, which you wouldn't necessarily suspect most teams have. How many teams are capable of employing a backup kicker? None, pretty much. So your punter comes in there, he misses. Now you try for a couple of two-point conversions. Both of those fail, and you end up losing 21-18 to the Commanders to 7 field goals. So they were in that game. It's not like Daniel Jones is lighting it up. He seems to have gotten a little bit of a free pass-a-roo coming off that victory. There's optimism all of a sudden coming out of New York City. The Cowboys, shockingly, after an extremely impressive performance in week number one, come right back and get shelled by the New Orleans Saints, and they were being handled pretty easily by the Baltimore Ravens. The final score there was 28-25, but for most of the ball game, it was a substantial margin in favor of the Ravens. They were up 28-6 when I tuned out on that thing, and I don't know how close the Cowboys came to actually winning the game or putting it into overtime. But still, I mean, very disappointing so far to get off to a 1-2 start. So we'll see what happens there. But many people do like the over in this game. So that may be a reason to consider going ahead and filing off a substantial amount of cash on the under. 46 and a hook. 45 is the over-under in that game. There is another game tonight that also seems to be screaming for people. They're all calling for the over, and that is the Army game, the service academies, with some interesting trends in that one that I don't know how they'll hold up. But the Army goes against Temple, and Army is laying 13 points in this game. Army's been pretty good so far. Here's a trend, a weird one, with the triple option, which is very difficult to prepare for. I'm not sure what significance you would attach to this, but we'll go ahead and fire it out there anyway. Since 2018, when it's been a short week game where the game is being contested, the two teams played the previous Saturday, and the next upcoming game with the Service Academy is on a Thursday or a Friday. The Academy comes out and puts a lot of points on the board. The over in those games is 14-3. because the defense just isn't prepared, and Army is putting up points. I mean, they've shellacked three very, very lesser light teams: Lehigh, FAU, and Rice, and they've gone over 1,000 yards rushing, averaging 6 yards per carry, and they're going against a defense that is an absolute sieve against the run. Temple's defense, 107th in the country, through 3 games against the run. So you have to figure there'll be points on the board. A lot of people pointing to the over in this game, 46.5. That, as I said, was an ongoing trend of all the handicapping consensus that I was able to decipher. People favoring the over in both the Army Temple game, 46 and a hook, and the over in the Dallas New York Giants game, as inept as the Giants offense has looked at times, at 45 points. Alabama, Georgia, the big college game. Talked to a lot of people about this game. Very unimpressed. I'm not a big fan of the look-ahead theory that's the reason a team looked like shit the previous week, with Georgia eking out this 13-12 victory. And you're asking yourself, well, were they looking ahead to this Alabama game? Yeah, certainly that could have been the case. But you remember being young, or maybe you are young now. I mean, you wanted to go and beat the shit out of everybody. You weren't sitting there going, "Oh, geez, we got Alabama next week." You were perfectly happy to play a patsy in the preparation for that game, and you wanted to look impressive and put 60 points on the board. So I'm not sure that I buy the look-ahead theory all that often, but if you were looking ahead to this game that's coming up, Alabama and Georgia, laying only 2 points. There seems to be a mixed bag of opinion, but the general trend I found, about, I would say, anywhere between 60 and 65% of the people that I talk to, are the handicapping equations that I've looked into and read by various people that have analyzed this game, that a slight majority favors Alabama at home. Tuscaloosa, a very difficult place to play, as we know. Alabama has been impressive so far this year as well. And while there are still believers, let me see it first, that Georgia is invincible, it seems like the slight majority of people favor Alabama in this game, in spite of the fact that Georgia is getting 2 points. All right, we're sorry about what happened with Mike Jones. That was unfortunate, because he had a lot to say about baseball and is an excellent baseball handicapper. We'll try and get him back on the show before the postseason gets underway. Maybe sometime early next week we can correct that issue with his microphone and bring you Mike Jones and his outstanding baseball insight. Tomorrow we'll have the professor, and he's been doing great on college football, knocking it out of the park there, as he went 3-1 last week, 3-2 on the show before, so 6-3 in college football picks, and always great insight. And as we say, part of the reason that we bring you these handicappers is just to see if you lock on to something or share an opinion. We're not saying, hey, absolutely, this is an empirical formula and a solid way to success. But it's always good to get different opinions on games, especially from guys that really dig into it and bet the games heavily themselves, as was the case. Troy West sent me something. He went 6-0 with his service last night in various bets that they had recommended. So, it makes up for a lot of weeks where you're maybe a game under 500 or just have to pay the juice. All right, we're going to get out of here. And thanks so much for being with us. A pleasure being with you. Lots to watch tonight. Cowboys and the Giants. I don't know. I'm not a big believer in the Giants. Are the Cowboys just a total fugazi team this year? Because I thought they were going to be very good coming out of week number 1. I was surprised to see them get pounded in the fashion they did, the ugly fashion they did against the Saints. Saints subsequently come out and lose to Philadelphia in a very dull effort after putting 90-some-odd points on the board the first couple of weeks. So what we can assess from that and deduce from that, difficult to say. You would have to think that the Cowboys, great incentive here tonight in an NFC Eastern rival game to try and show that they are back on track. We'll see what happens. But, I would be inclined to go ahead and agree with Troy West. And if I was betting the game, maybe take a slight lean towards the Cowboys, as much as I root against them. So good luck with your wagers on tonight's games. Both of them, as I said, we're trending in terms of handicapping consensus towards people favoring the overs. 45 in the Cowboys Giants game and 46.5 Army, and Temple. All right, we'll see you next time. We'll have the professor on with us tomorrow. We'll dive into some serious college football plays as we join you on the next edition of Greenlight Ventures' presentation of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff Deforrest. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and stay safe if you're in our home state here of Florida.